Hello and welcome to my M1 Pro and Max power usage analysis. So I'm trying to take the numbers from the M1 and intelligently extrapolate that out to the M1 Pro and Max. First of all, those who are saying that the M1 Pro is simply a blown up version of the M1, that is categorically wrong. And that is because the M1 uses DDR4 memory, DDR4, and then the M1 uses DDR5, rather LPDDR5 to be accurate. So that is a generational difference. That means the memory controller, where you have one here, let me make this larger. You have one here and then one on the other side. Both of these memory controllers are a different generation, and I believe the system level cache, the SLC blocks here, are also different in architecture. I was reading about that. So there are some chip level differences between these. So it's not fair to say that it's just an M1 that's been kind of overgrown, so to speak. The M1 Max and the M1 Pro are very similar. You will notice that you have, instead of two memory controllers, you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And whereas this is on the M1, it's a 128-bit memory controller. Here you have 128 on either side, which leads to a 256-bit memory controller. And I believe on the M1 Max, since you have two chips, you have two buses which are 256-bit each. That does not become a 512-bit bus. Okay, now that I'm done going on that rant, I just Googled what the power consumption would be, and I got a number of 26.5 watts. So we can kind of start there. We already know that the M1 MacBook Air comes with a 30-watt power adapter for an 8-core, 7-core GPU chip. So obviously consumption has to be less than 30 watts. So this sounds about right for an 8-core chip. Let's call it that. And then I was doing some reading on what the power split is between the efficiency cores and the performance cores. And I have no idea what this website is, Sama Game. They had some interesting numbers where they mentioned that the high performance cores are barely used, and then that the efficiency cores are extremely efficient and that they barely use any power. In my own experience let me interject with this, from using this Klein Tools USB meter, the way it works is hook it up to this. You can use either USB Type-C or Type-A. Hook it up to power and then hook up the laptop to this. Based on testing with that, I've noticed that this claim is true. The computer uses a fraction of a watt. It's pretty insane. It'll sit there, use about a half a watt, and then you move the mouse, it'll go up to about a watt. It's positively insane. On the high end, it'll use about 20 watts under load, and that's what I noticed. So that 26 watt number makes a lot of sense to me. Apple quotes a 39 watt number for the MacBook, the one without the display. I can't remember what it's called. The one you hook up to a TV. So that makes sense because that one has a bigger fan, etc., etc. And that's also a much higher, Apple's not going to give you a small number. They're going to give you the larger number. So we are just worried about the SoC. Granted, there's not much other than the SoC. But anyway, I'm going to use these numbers, and let's take a quick look at what the chip looks like. Okay, so here are some numbers for you. I took the numbers from the M1. So this is what I'm assuming, and I'm extrapolating this to the M1 Pro and Max. I'm taking 1.5 watts per core for the power cores, and then I'm going to take them up on that 1/10 number. And so let's go with 0.15. Let me zoom you in a little bit. So 0.15 per core for the efficiency cores times 4, which gives us 0.6 total usage. And then 6 watts for the power cores. Actually, yep. So 4 and 4. 4 efficiency cores, 4 power cores here for the M1. GPU, I'm going to go with the 8-core. I'm going to go with the highest spec, so 8, 16, 32 is what I'm going to go with. 8 cores at, again, 1.5 watts. I'm going to go with the fact that the GPU and each of the CPU cores are about the same size, so I'm going to give them 1.5 watts each. The uncore, so this would be the memory controller and neural engine, blah, 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 all that other stuff. And then the SSD is actually it can be surprisingly power hungry. So that and other, whatever else I'm forgetting, I'm going to give it 5 watts. So this is going to be 5 across the board. Excuse me. So all that gives us about 25.6 watts total. And if you take the chip size, which is 120 square millimeters, divide that by the number of watts used, the 4.68 number, this is about how much heat you're getting, or it's, ballpark numbers, right? About 4.6, 4.7 watts per unit area is what I'm getting. And then going down to the M1 Pro and Max, again, the same numbers because the cores are the same. The numbers are different though. Instead of 4 efficiency cores, we have 2, and just coming down the line. This time we have a usage of 45 watts and a higher millimeter per watt. In other words, this is more area to dissipate the same amount of energy. In other words, if you look at, on average, how much energy is coming out of the chip, there's less energy coming out per square millimeter. And this actually adds up in its own funny way, because if you look at the number of power cores on each of these, you have 8 GPU cores. We'll call them, when I say power core, I mean a cube of area that's generating heat. And the GPU and the CPU, the power core anyway, are about the same size. So you have 12, so 8 plus 4, and you have about 120 square millimeters. And that math kind of checks out going down here. So you have 24, 16 plus 8, 24, about 240 square millimeters. A little larger than that, we have 120 and 246. So this math kind of makes sense. And again, we have 32 plus 8, so about 40. We have 430. So the fact that this is slightly higher than this kind of checks out. So yeah, these are the numbers I'm going to go with: 25, 45, and let's just say 75, around the ballpark. And from a battery perspective, you can have either a 50 watt hour or 58 watt hour, depending on whether you have the Air or the Pro. And then for the 14, you have the 70. And then for the 16, you have the 100 watt hour pack. So in order to fast charge this, this is not the same number in watt hours converted to watts. This is 100 watt hours, or in other words, 100 watts for 1 hour, times 2, because we're trying to get a charge in 30 minutes. But then we only have 50%, so again, divide by 2. So 100 times 2 divided by 2, that gives us the 100 watts that we need to fast charge this battery to 50% in 30 minutes. Now keep in mind that that doesn't include the system running. So if you want to run the system at full tilt and fast charge, that'll actually take you 170 watts. And this comes with a 140 watt power adapter. So that tells me that you won't be able to crank out 100% on the GPUs and the CPUs with a 16-inch M1 Max maxed out and fast charge at the same time, but hey, it's pretty damn close. On the M1 Pro, similar story, 70 watt hour battery, so you need about 70 watts to fast charge. And this comes with a 96 watt adapter, similar story. You have 140 for a 180, 175 watt usage. Here you have 70 plus, let's just go with 50. So you get a 100 watt charger for 120 watt maximum use. That'll do a pretty good job. And here you have 25 watts of usage and a, well, depending on which one you get, either a 67 or a 30 watt charger. With the 30 watt charger, it's going to be tough. It's not going to do a great job of charging while using the computer at full tilt, but yeah, not too much experience with that. The MacBook Air will probably thermal throttle before you go full bore, which is probably why the MacBook Pro, which also has a larger battery, comes with the 67 watt. So again, similar story, the numbers seem to check out. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough, but yeah, these are my numbers, and I guess next Monday or whenever that is, we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching.